Welcome in, everyone, to the It's Official podcast presented by First Bet and Express Bet, created by Jeff Siegel, proudly hosted by Jeremy Plonk. This is a fun week for the podcast this week. I know the Breeders' Cup is, beyond us now, over the horizon as we look forward to the end of the calendar year. Not a lot of huge racing going, but this is a fun week, a show where we get to look at a regional superstar. I love the regional game across the country in various pockets of the country where superstar horses mean a lot to the local communities. We'll talk about one of those. We're going to hit a little disco up this week, if you will. We've got hottest jockey on the planet to talk about this week as well. And probably the most expensive star of tomorrow we've ever debuted in this segment, a $5 million colt to talk about who could be on the Kentucky Derby Trail. So without further ado, as Jeff Siegel loved to do in this spot, we start things off with our Goosebump Award winner for this past week. Who's the horse that got us most excited, the one we wanted to see, who got the hair on our arms raised and got us up out of our chairs rooting? Well, for me, it was a regional superstar down in Louisiana. You might not know this horse, but you should. Touch Upon a Star was back at it at Delta Downs Saturday night in the Delta Mile, and he won it by a mile.
Past the Dino playing into second, but with a furlong to go, Touch Upon a Star may have just put him away, and in fact, I believe he did. It's Touch Upon a Star with a look back here by Tim Thornton. There is absolutely no competition. He does it again at Delta Downs. Wow, it's Touch Upon a Star. Cajun Matoli was second, the Donegal clan third, and fourth was Highland Creek.
Big time effort from Touch Upon a Star. Don Stevens on the mic there. Don, a guy I knew back when he was just a cub getting into the game, the voice of Delta Downs, calling home Touch Upon a Star once again, as Don has done 8 times, I believe, in 9 starts over the track at Delta Downs. He just simply rarely loses there. Lost the Delta Mile last year, had won it in 2023, and avenged a third-place finish from last year. Now you look at a horse like Touch Upon a Star at 6 years old, is 5 for 6 this year, and, I know he's just the state bred, but he won the New Orleans Classic this year, beating Sierra Leone, the Breeders' Cup Classic winner. So, look, he can win on the big stage at Fairgrounds. He could win at home at Delta Downs for Jake and Jeff Delhomme, of course. Jake Delhomme, the famous quarterback, Carolina Panthers, leading them to the Super Bowl in his NFL days. Now a proud owner of thoroughbreds there in Louisiana. His brother Jeff, the trainer. Touch Upon a Star, the kind of regional horse we just love. Takes me back to my childhood, and a horse like Onion Juice in West Virginia, Researcher in West Virginia more recently, Pepper's Pride in New Mexico, the Chosen Vron in recent times, dominating the Cowbreds in Southern California. It was kind of nice to see the Chosen Vron Stakes run this past weekend for the first time, inaugurated at Del Mar. So these regional horses have a real soft spot for me in my pocket. I think that's how you develop fans and, people who get interested in the local racing scene and want to get out on track to see some of these stars. Touch Upon a Star in Louisiana is just that. What a great performance. 6 years old, winning by 10 lengths and getting this week's Goosebump Award. We've had a couple different options we could have went with this week, and the 6-year-old got the nod. We could have talked about a 7-year-old, in fact, but we will next. Let's talk about a horse who just does not care which surface he runs over. Wolfie's Dino Ghost was howling at the moon again. In the River City Stakes at Churchill Downs, the 7-year-old almost set the 9-furlong course record. Earlier this year, he set that same distance course record at Laurel. Now trained by Brian Lynch, he won the River City Stakes for his 13th career victory. Let's go back to Wolfie's Dino Ghost winning in Louisville.
Taking Candy, powers up 3 wide. Encino's under pressure, chasing the crown, boxed in behind horses. Mercante coming down the top of the turf, and Laginos is trying to come through toward the rail. But in the meantime, Wolfie's Dino Ghost kicked away. 4-length lead. Taking Candy, Laginos running on late, but they're coming for the finish. Wolfie's Dino Ghost and Saez, they sizzled on the front end to win it by 4 in the end.
0.07 off the course record at Churchill Downs. And like I said, had already set the 9-furlong turf record at Laurel earlier this year when winning the Prince George's County Stakes. Formerly trained by Jonathan Thomas, switched to the Brian Lynch barn for this start. 13 for 31 lifetime now for Wolfie's Dino Ghost. $1.2 million earned. One of the big stars of the week. There was a time when I thought Wolfie's Dino Ghost might be the best synthetic horse in the country. And, that and a quarter will get you a Subway token, as the old old statement used to say, you don't get much for a quarter these days. But, he was so good on the synthetic. He's won 5 times on synthetic racetracks, won the Kentucky Cup Classic at Turfway. He's won synthetic races in Florida, in Canada. But he's darn good on the turf. When you look at his record now, he's got 2 wins on the dirt, a 5 on the synthetic, and that was his 6th win on the turf now in winning the River City. So he's not just kind of a niche player who can kind of fit with horses that aren't quite up to snuff on synthetic, and he obviously excels over synthetic footing, but he doesn't need to necessarily catch horses on that preferred footing for him. On the turf, he's showing out to be quite a 7-year-old this year. Wolfie's Dynaghost. I mean, we start with Touch Upon a Star, the 6-year-old. Wolfie's Dynaghost, the 7. We get some news this week that we could see some of these star 3-year-olds from this year back next year. Baeza expected back. Journalism expected back. We still don't know sovereignty status for his 4-year-old campaign, but they haven't said no yet. And so seeing these horses stay around the game is great for fans of racing, people who are bettors and familiar with the horses and want to see the best of the best stick around. Certainly the horse players out there enjoy seeing the top-notch quality year after year after year, whereas I know the breeders want to whisk them off and make the commercial profits on them. So 2 horses this week, Wolfie's Dynaghost, Touch Upon a Star, that we can kind of look at a little bit as throwbacks and enjoy what they did last week. Again, I'm not saying winning the River Cities. It's not the Breeders' Cup, obviously. It's not a big Saratoga Summer Stakes race. But for Wolfie's Dynaghost at age 7, he's able to handle graded stakes level competition on the turf in a big circuit like Kentucky. Says a lot about him. He's really doing well right now. Great job in the training from Jonathan Thomas and all those starts. And now Brian Lynch with the halter of Wolfie's Dynaghost. Howlin' at the Moon, our second topic this week on It's Official. Our third topic this week, the time has finally come for disco. First you were afraid, you were petrified, but I won't go through the entire song. We're talking disco time here, not the era of disco, of course. And the time has finally arrived for disco because disco time for trainer Brad Cox was one of the favorites towards the Kentucky Derby earlier this season when he ran through and won the Lecomte Stakes. That got him to 3 for 3 lifetime. He was on the top 5 of many Triple Crown watch lists. And this horse was kind of one of those destined to be maybe Brad Cox's first traditional Kentucky Derby winner. Of course, we know he won by disqualification with Mandaloun, but Cox looking to get to the winner's circle on Derby Day with one. And many thought this was his best chance, disco time, earlier this year. But then he was sidelined for 8 months and a day from January 18th all the way to September 19th when he came back and he won in the St. Louis Derby. The competition that day was okay against Hypnus. He took on a little bit stronger cast this past weekend in the race called the Dwyer Stakes at Aqueduct. And I'll tell you what, the way he looked, they're starting to get excited about disco time. Let's go back to his win in the Dwyer.
Disco time with a quarter mile left to go in the Dwyer. Now gets the cue to kick for home. Crudo has taken second. Tip Top Thomas back to third. Stars and Stripes the trailer. Disco time is extending that stride and opening up, and a look over his right shoulder, and he sees an 8-length cushion. Florent Giroux, Disco time, a 16th left to go, and they are going to dominate here in the Dwyer. It's all disco time to win it. Crudo's second, Tip Top Thomas in a photo with Stars and Stripes in
9 3/4 lengths, the winning margin there in the Dwyer Stakes. Put daylight between he and 2 Todd Pletcher trainees, not Pletcher superstars. Crudo didn't live up to what we thought. Tip Top Thomas has come back from injury to be a decent 3-year-old, but certainly no star. It'll get tougher for Disco Time if he's able to get back next year as a 4-year-old to a top level. You might think he's a horse who would be suited for the 7 Furlong Malibu in Southern California on December 26th, opening day of the Santa Anita Winter Spring Meet, but that's not going to be the case with him. They are looking at the Saudi Cup for Disco Time. They want to go the 1-turn mile and an eighth for the big money, a 7-figure purse in Saudi Arabia coming up in February. Trainer Brad Cox says that's the goal, and they may go without a prep. He says they don't think they need a prep to go into that race in February, that they train off of this win in November. And then in the Dwyer, and the next time we might see Disco Time, he might be running against some of the world's best in the Saudi Cup at a mile and an eighth in the spring, in the winter in February. in Saudi Arabia. Very interesting runner. Look, you look at the pedigree for him. He's a horse that we would expect to be good in a race like this in the Dwyer. But as they get going farther and farther, a two-turn big distance race for him, maybe not the case. He's by not this time. He's a very versatile sire who's getting winners in all situations. But the damn Disco Chick, she was a sprint mare, no question about that. So I don't think that you would be looking at this like as a Dubai World Cup horse at a mile and a quarter around two turns, but a mile and an eighth around one turn. What they're going to try to do is use the brilliance and the class of Not This Time, the speed of the mare Disco Chick, and see if they can't get a big money race around one turn in that mile and an eighth. Cigar Mile against older horses might be a consideration if you wanted to wheel back really quick. But again, the talk right now from Brad Cox and the camp with this Juddmonte homebred is Disco Time, destined for February and running in the Saudi Cup. Very interesting. And I'll tell you what, at 5 for 5 lifetime, he's got an excellent resume. He's gotten progressively better in each start as they've gone a little bit farther. Now they cut back to the mile in the Dwyer, and they'll get some time off and see if they can trade him up to the one-turn mile and an eighth of the Saudi Cup. But certainly the time has come for Disco. It's not 1978. We've got a flashback in 2025 of a really nice looking runner here. And we're glad to see him back after being away for 8 months and a day on his racing resume already this year. Let's go to our fourth topic this week on the It's Official podcast. We go from Disco Time to Prat-o-matic. It's automatic. You just take Flavien Prat in New York these days. What a run from Flavien Prat. If you go back to Breeders' Cup weekend, October 31st, and November 1st, Flavien Prat had that great Saturday on Breeders' Cup Day where he won the Filly and Mare Sprint aboard Splendora. He won the Dirt Mile aboard Nisos, both of those for Bob Baffert. Less than 24 hours later, he was in New York riding an Aqueduct to a tune of a 7-win day, an all-time record performance, most wins on a single card in New York history on November 2nd, and it hasn't stopped since. If you go back and look at the stats for Flavien Prat, he's got 35% winners, 50% in the exacta since October 31st. Since returning to Aqueduct, he's won 16 of those 34 races. Not only 16 wins, but he's got 22 of 34 in the exacta since returning to ride at Aqueduct. Now, of those 34 mounts that he's had at the Big A, 17 have been favorites, and you say, well, he's just riding all the chalk. But the public's following Prat after the way he's been winning, and you can't complain just because you're winning on favorites when you win 13 of 17 aboard the chalk. That's 76% wins. 88% of the favorites he's ridden during this unbelievable run at Aqueduct have been in the exacta. Just a phenomenal run here from Flavien Prat. He's back at it with the horses like Deep Learning, winning the Chelsea Flower Stakes last week. He had the record 7-day win back on November 2nd. He had a 4-win day on November 6th. 3 stakes wins already in the month of November at Aqueduct. We're only on the 11th of the month as we record this podcast. But it was really the big 7th and final winner that made history for him back on November 2nd. Chris Griffith with the call to accentuate the historic ride.
Trajectory is in between horses in fifth, is being ready to be unleashed towards the outside. Stamp of Approval is in front. Stamp of Approval trying to run away. Toes, here comes the end, and here comes Growth Trajectory. Growth Trajectory on the grandstand side. It is Toes who's taking the lead. Can Growth Trajectory help Flavien Prat now reach the new record in New York? It's Growth Trajectory who wins it. Growth Trajectory wins it over Toes. The end then came Lying by Omission in a photo there with Crazy Cammy. And Flavien Prat, he stands alone in that rarefied air. 7 wins on the day here at Belmont at the Big A.
And Flavien Prat we talk about in this segment. Brad Cox we talked about in the previous topic when talking about Disco Time. Those two paths are going to connect this weekend at Aqueduct as we look at the continued run, perhaps, for Flavien Prat and Brad Cox as they team up with Fion in the Jockey Club Oaks Invitational, the big race this weekend, $350,000 Grade 3. Fion earlier this year won the Dueling Grounds Oaks, won the Belmont Oaks Invitational, won the Regret at Churchill Downs during Oaks and Derby, or at the end of the month of May. So Fion, one of the top 3-year-old fillies on the turf this year. She will be Prat and Cox teaming up this Saturday. So a lot of connecting of the dots here on what's been going well in racing in recent weeks. all kind of crossing paths there this weekend in the Belmont Oaks Invitational. That's really the big race of the week this week coming up in horse racing, the Belmont Oaks Invitational at Aqueduct. That'll be the 7th race on the Saturday card. Other big action this weekend includes Saturday's Claiming Crown at Churchill Downs. Of course, the starter allowance set, horses who have run in claiming races over the last year or two to be eligible in that one, kind of the blue-collar Breeders' Cup, if you will. We'll have plenty of handicapping on the Jockey Club Oaks, as well as the Claiming Crown card when we have our Friday podcast this week. Scott Shapiro and I team up for the First Call podcast each and every Friday when we handicap weekend stakes races. We'll have a big look, and we'll see if Pratt and Cox can do it again with Fionn. We'll get Scott's opinion on that race, and we'll also handicap some of those big races from the Claiming Crown coming up this weekend, that at Churchill Downs. We've got a star of tomorrow, though, to finish up the card or finish up the podcast this week for you, and this is a historic star of tomorrow. I'm fairly certain this is the most expensive colt we've talked about in this segment. Courting on Sunday at Aqueduct. The colt named Courting, a 2-year-old son of not only Curlin, but also the star mare Cavorting. She was a Grade 1 winner. Curlin, of course, one of the all-time greats of the last quarter century. Those two teaming up with this 2-year-old colt who brought $5 million at the Keeneland September yearling sale a couple years ago. Todd Pletcher trains. It was the second career start for this star of tomorrow named Courting, sent off at 1-9 odds. Going to win this race by 2.5. Let's go back and take a look at our star of tomorrow. The name is Courting. Remember this one as we get to the Kentucky Derby Trail coming up in the spring.
The top of the stretch, the 1-9 favorite's got a tussle on his hand with a big long shot in Stream It, the gray down the center of the racetrack. Courting has still got more. Grittiness starts to collect some momentum too. Courting is just slowly extending away here from Stream It, who's alone in second. Grittiness is going to try one final time. Courting has a 16th left to go, and Courting will get the victory. Courting will win it. Grittiness second. Stream It, and I'm a Big Bad Wolf. 1:36.
One you've got to watch heading to Florida to be sure with Todd Pletcher, and we'll see how this one performs towards the Florida Derby Series. Perhaps maybe we'll see this one in a race like the Holy Bull maybe in the springtime. We'll see what Pletcher's plan is for this full brother to Clairiere. Of course, Clairiere, multiple Grade 1 winner, 4-time Grade 1 winner of more than $3 million. Full brother to Clairiere. The Dam Cavorting, of course, multiple Grade 1 winner in her own right. The Test, the Ogden Phipps, the personal Ensign she won during her star racing career. And she's not just a one-trick pony when it comes to the Dam side there. Yes, she did produce an unbelievable mare like Clairiere, but she also produced Judge Miller, who was a really talented colt, got off to a quick start, kind of star-crossed in terms of developing into a superstar, but was third in the Hollywood Gold Cup and just, I believe, his fourth career start. Didn't make it to the races much, but certainly had a lot of talent. That's kind of the way we're looking at here with Courting. Looks to have quite a bit of talent off that second start Maiden Breaker for Todd Pletcher. Looking forward to seeing that one this winter in New York. Let's review the 5 topics this week on the It's Official podcast. We started off with the Goosebump Award. It was the horse who exacted Sierra Leone earlier this year, Touch Upon a Star, doing it against Delta Downs competition in the Delta Mile, 10-length winner for that 6-year-old for Jake and Jeff Delhomme. Then we went Howling at the Moon with Wolfie's Dynagos, one of the better synthetic horses in America, has a course record on the turf this year at Laurel and almost got a second course record on the turf in winning the River City Stakes. Age 7, he said, hey, Touch Upon a Star, I'll one-up you in that age department. The time has finally come for Disco. Disco Time, back off an 8-month layoff, has now won 2 straight, won the St. Louis Derby, and then came back this past weekend to win the Dwyer Stakes by almost 10 lengths, 9 3/4 the final margin. We expect to see that one in the Saudi Cup come February. Prat-o-matic, Flavian Pratt's been automatic at Aqueduct since the Breeders' Cup. He returned to New York and has won 16 of 34 starts since returning to the Big A. He'll team up this weekend with Fionn. Trainer Brad Cox is one of the favorites to watch in the Jockey Club Oaks Invitational. And our star of tomorrow this week was Courting, Sunday maiden allowance winner, maiden special, race number 2 at Aqueduct by Curlin out of Cavorting, a $5 million purchase for Todd Pletcher. Expect to see that one in Florida this winter on the Derby Trail. The name, Courting. Keep an eye on that one. Those 5 topics are now official because our handicapper emeritus, Jeff Siegel, and I say so. That's the way we play the game here on the It's Official podcast. I'll be back next week with 5 more hot topics in racing. Again, I want to remind you, on Friday this week, Scott Shapiro and I will team up to handicap 8 weekend stakes races, including the ones from New York, the Claiming Crown coming up in Kentucky, and much more from around the country. On behalf of everybody with First Bet and Express Bet, a salute to our veterans on this Veterans Day podcast. Thanks to all who have served and those who died in service so that we can all be safe and free. God bless America, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.